We keep on meeting like this. I really wish we were back to the once a month. It seemed much nicer. Um, Better times, what can I say? This has been another one of those challenging days, although frankly, we got a night's sleep here in Tel Aviv. In fact, I don't want to, as I say, liftoch per satan, to open my mouth to the devil, but I have not had to be in the bomb shelter since yesterday afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I believe, which has definitely been good, although not for the rest of the country. The day started off with the bad news that another soldier had died in Lebanon. In this case, an American immigrant who was here only about a year, a Chabad kid from New Haven who made aliyah a year ago. What's even more, I mean, terrible the fact that he died, obviously, in every which way. What's I found even more remarkable is they interviewed his sister on uh, on the radio this morning, and his sister came on Aliyah immediately after high school and went into the army and was in a combat unit. So I'll have to rethink what's going on with Chabad in America these days.
What do you
Obviously,
mean?
they've become more Zionist than the Chabad that I used to know, but I
He
haven't been there
wasn't a
in
bad Zionist.
a long time. Um, in any case, so that started the day with the bad news. The Israeli troops. We'll talk more about Lebanon in a minute, but the fact is, when they are inside of Lebanon, they become targets. And they don't have the sort of protection they would have in bases and everything else. And Hezbollah is making use of that to fire many of their rockets at the troops in southern Lebanon, as opposed to the towns and villages inside of Israel, which they're not ignoring. In any case, um, the Iranians have fired a number of missiles today, mostly at the south, theoretically aiming at the nuclear, so-called nuclear plant in Dimona. At least that's what they claim. They did have a success about an hour ago in that they hit a fertilizer plant, a company called Adama. I think I wrote it up, sometime in the last 2 years. I wrote up that company, and there it's a petrochemical plant that produces fertilizer and other chemicals, and of course something that's highly flammable. And from what I understand, there was a secondary explosion recently at the plant, and the plant is currently um, uh, releasing toxic fumes into the area. The fire has not been brought under control. Thankfully, only one person was very lightly wounded in this attack. Uh, and there's been another attack in the Negev about, I don't know, about 20 minutes ago, I guess it was more or less. And in that case, um, there were a number of different locations that were hit. But as best as I've been able to see so far, once again, no one was hurt, and that in many ways is the key. What we're finding pretty consistently is that as long as people follow instructions, go into the safe rooms or go into the more into shelters, people do not get hurt. Structures do. As far as I just saw this second, the soccer stadium in Beersheva was damaged in this latest round of attacks. A couple of days ago, some of the classrooms in the Technion were damaged. Over the weekend, in the attack that took place, I guess it was Friday night in Tel Aviv, where
Oh,
a man was killed. The Acadia Hotel, which is in Herzliya, which I have very warm memories of being there with my parents when I was 13, and they took us. I was on a group tour, and they picked myself and two other friends up from the tour, and we spent the luxurious weekend in the Acadia Hotel. Anyway, that was lightly damaged by one of these rockets that the warheads break up into multiple warheads, and then they hit various places. Uh, but the war continues. There is no sense at all of when it's going to end. It's not in Israel's control at all. And that's one of the things to keep in mind that it's not in Israel's control. It's 100% in Trump's control. And what that means, we don't really know. What I can say with without a doubt that both Israel and the United States suffer from the same um, disease, I will call it that, in that total hollowing out of the national security establishment, of the cabinet, of whoever. Here it's Bibi, 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 only he makes decisions. There is nobody of any substance who comes to these meetings who either pushes back or has alternative ideas or brings other thoughts into the meetings. Maybe the army does sometimes, but from the civilian side, there is nobody left. The National Security Council that exists, which is a which every report on previous Israeli wars kept on saying must be strengthened, and there needs to be a strong National Security Council. It has been hollowed out, and there's been no head of it for I'm not sure, it's been 9 months since Tzachi Negbi resigned, maybe 6 months, I'm not sure. But since then, there's been no replacement for him because Bibi doesn't need a replacement because it's only Bibi making decisions. The states, it's probably worse. Uh, the State Department, the National Security Council have been completely emptied of people. There are no experts anywheres. There's no expertise. When there's a meeting, no one brings all the various views, counter views. During most presidential administrations, usually the president is presented with 6 or 7 different options, go back and forth. He's given, this is the view of this is the view of that, here is this, here's the consequences that might come, here are the unintended consequences that might come, etc., etc. None of that's taking place. We have a president who doesn't read briefings, doesn't read intelligence reports. Sometimes he makes good decisions from the seat of his pants, sometimes not so good decisions. But the bottom line is there is no process at all involved either here or there. I guess here we don't need a process anymore because we have no control other than selecting which targets that we're going to hit in Iran today, which the Air Force and the Army seem to be doing on a very consistent and on some levels successful basis, but successful in terms of what we don't know ultimately, because at this point it's not clear what the goals of this war are. We know what we want. We know that one of the key things is to get the uranium that's been enriched out of the country. That will be one of the key factors whether this war will have been a disaster or not. Um, we'll have to see. If not, then this will have been probably the largest strategic mistake Israel has ever made. But we'll see. Uh, the problem, the problem with the job half done is all you end up with is an enemy that's even more angry. Not that they needed any other reasons. Understand the Iranian regime has been talking about destroying us for 50 years. Uh, I don't know. It's not. I'm not overly optimistic. Some days it sounds like there's some chance that the regime might or might not be in trouble. We don't really know enough. I hope Israeli intelligence knows more. I don't know. I hope American intelligence knows more. But certainly the Israeli public has no idea. We have talking heads that get on TV, including me once in a while, and talk as if we know something, but no one really knows. That's the reality. Where we stand right now, we simply do not know. The army talks about, well, we hit this place and that place and this. And today there was an encouraging story that the president of Iran has said if this war goes on for a few more weeks, the Iranian economy will collapse. Maybe that's true. I don't know. And we don't know whether the report is true or not. It emanated from Iran International, which is an opposition newspaper, um, but it could be. The U.S. has troops ready to go in. Where exactly is not clear. There are a lot of alternative scenarios that could be done. There's talk about using special forces, grabbing certain strategic locations, maybe grabbing the uranium. Lots of options. Not at all clear which ones are really feasible or not feasible. And of course, even less clear is what President Trump is going to decide to do or not decide to do. We clearly underestimated the staying power of the regime, and maybe we understood that they were going to retaliate by closing the Straits of Hormuz and by doing what they've done. I don't know. I don't think so, at least the United States,
Hey,
because
one
if the
thing
United
about me,
States thought that was the case, it would have brought troops that were, and I should say troops less so, but ships that would have been effective in opening up the straits from the beginning. And it simply does not have yet, I'm not sure what's on the way, enough ships to even escort ships to the straits, which would be dangerous but possible. And it doesn't have minesweeping ships available in the Gulf at all. These are all things that you would do if you anticipated the Iranians were going to close the Straits of Hormuz. So in the meantime, they have not, and the Iranians are causing pain. Let's put it that way. How big the pain really depends. Uh, it really depends on how long it lasts. I think it's true that if the war was to end on some sort of positive note, whatever that might be, price of oil will go down very quickly, and the economic impact will be short. However, keep in mind the fact that it's happening at the same time when the intersection of disruption by AI and the economy, by a situation where, by all by all normal means, the stock markets in the United States, in particular, but in the rest of the world as well, are what's considered overvalued from the, from basis, from price and earnings ratios and all those sort of things. So it's a potential for a really bad scenario. Let's put it that way. My greater concern, if there's anything greater or lesser, is that what this is doing for the long-term support for Israel in the United States. It's feeding the narrative on the right in the Republican Party that Israel is controlling American foreign policy, working against the interests of of American foreign policy. And since at this point the only thing that Israel can rely on are the Republicans, since the Democrats seem quite lost to us, or at least good chunks of the Democratic Party, that puts us into really dangerous place, I think, going forward. But the Israeli public doesn't really understand that. It's brought up once in a while in panels, but it certainly has not sunk in to the effect. Um, as I've written before, the first
Okay.
week there was a certain level of euphoria, feeling, oh, look, we finally got them, we've gotten the Iranians, etc. There's a realization at this point of two things. Number one, the fact that um, we haven't done it. We haven't done it. We destroyed all sorts of different facilities, etc. And we can keep on
Commander.
destroying, but they're still firing missiles at us. The airport is effectively closed, if not totally closed. Israelis can't leave the country.
Stay.
Uh,
Stay.
a lot of people who were expecting to leave during Passover, of course, for the
Stay.
vacation, are
Stay.
all stuck here at the moment. But it's not really the actual people who can't go. It's the feeling that you're trapped. You can't do anything, uh, and the Iranians have successfully closed Ben Gurion Airport effectively. I mean, not totally, obviously, is one plane an hour departing. Plus, there's all the American forces that are on in the airport. It should be noted that part of the reason the airport is closed or so limited operations is the fact that Ben Gurion Airport has effectively become a U.S. Air Force base
Oh
with
my God.
tanker aircraft all over and tankers flying out at all hours, day and night, to provide U.S. and Israeli forces with tanking fuel, I should say, on their way to Iran. Um, Yesterday, we got the unhappy news that the Houthis have joined in the game. Uh, the Houthis were mostly an annoyance last time, just another reason to wake up in the middle of the night. We've successfully usually knocked down almost all of their missiles, but there were two early in their shooting that got through. One landed in Ramat Gan and destroyed a school that was empty, and one landed in a courtyard of buildings in Jaffa. Thankfully, it landed in the courtyard, not in one of the buildings. But those two successes, quote unquote, were enough that all of us take the Houthis with seriousness to at least go down to our bomb shelters. Um, Tel Aviv, relatively speaking, has gotten less of the
Ah,
less of the
okay.
bombs and rockets than the rest of the country. I should say, well, most of the rest of the country.
Sit,
Certainly less than the
sit,
south.
guys.
Certainly less than the south, and certainly to some extent less. Well, Haifa has been getting, of course, from Hezbollah, and we'll go into Hezbollah in 1 second. Uh, but um, life is, I wouldn't say is back to normal, but some of the restaurants are still reasonably full at night when they shouldn't be. And people are going about most of their business mostly normally. We've been on the conservative side of my family in not going too far from the house, um, not wanting to visit random shelters, which is what I've done in the previous wars. Not even totally sure why.
In progress.
But I've been staying within the 3 to 4 minute run from the house with the dog. So if I can run back in 3 or 4 minutes, that's fine. And so
Sit,
far so
sit,
good. Um,
sit. Shani, sit.
um, so in any case, um, that's in terms of Tel Aviv. I want to turn to the north for a moment. This is another a case where we went to war on purpose. A decision was made, and in that case, even part of the cabinet disapproved of the idea. Two of the cabinet ministers
Sit,
voted against it,
sit.
um, but but we decided to do it anyway, anticipating
You want me to put it on
less
theirs?
than what we got
Oh,
in terms of
God.
the
Can you hear it?
ability that Hezbollah has is more than we had expected. I think it surprised most Israelis who were told last time that we had successfully deterred them for almost a generation. It wasn't quite a generation, but it turns out that wasn't the case. They were prepared for this. They don't have the arsenal they once did. In other words, if prior to the last war, there was thoughts that they had, maybe 500 missiles they could fire at Tel Aviv. So far, in 4 weeks of fighting, they've fired, if I'm not mistaken, 12 missiles at the center of the country, all of which have been intercepted. It's reasonably easy to intercept the Hezbollah missiles coming to Tel Aviv. Our missile systems were really designed for that, and there's enough warning and enough time that things coming from all the way on the Lebanese border, which are not ballistic, they're a much lower trajectory, can be um, can be intercepted with reasonable effectiveness. But the people living up north, they have 20 seconds, 30 seconds. The wait, the excuse me, the warning is becoming a little bit longer today. There was a change in policy, which is a whole other story. But still, it doesn't go by a few minutes when there isn't some sort of warning on my screen of either a drone in the north or a rocket attack in the north, whether it's Haifa, whether it's the Krayot, which are the area on the other side of the bay, Akko, of course, Nahariya, time and time again, and of course, all the communities along the border, be it Shlomi, be it Kiryat Shmona, and um, Ma'alot. All those places are being hit pretty frequently in the course of a day. Uh, and that's beyond the fact that our soldiers are fairly deep into Lebanon. The problem is, it's not quite clear how the soldiers being in Lebanon will necessarily bring about a solution to the problem. Thank you. Um, okay, so um, the goal is to get the Hezbollah to be disarmed, but Hezbollah doesn't plan on disarming. The Lebanese government doesn't have the ability to disarm them, and it's not clear how we're going to disarm them. We might have the military ability, possibly, to disarm them, but we didn't successfully disarm the Hamas. So now we're going to disarm Hezbollah. Um, it seems like it's a challenge that, yes, we could do it, but will it work? And what's going to happen afterwards? And is it going to be successful? And God knows how many Lebanese are going to die, and because a lot of people are going to die, and we're going to start once again the cycle, once again the terrible massacres that Israel is doing to the poor Lebanese, Hezbollah. That's what's going to happen. And I don't know. I don't know where the solution lies. The solution, in my opinion, was we should have waited to see what the results with Iran had been, because if the regime changes in Iran, Hezbollah might wither on the vine, might not, but it might wither on the vine and might be able to uh, be taken care of by the Lebanese government. But we are where we are. We are stuck in a war of attrition, effectively, on both the Iran and the Lebanese fronts. It's a war of attrition, which the population is semi-resilient. As a friend of mine said to me, who owns a coffee shop, she said, "No one asked me if I wanted to be resilient, if I wanted not to have customers." You know, Netanyahu happily says we have such a resilient population. Well, this resilient population has been resilient for a long time, and it's getting tired of being resilient, let's put it that way. And it's being tired of being traumatized to a very large extent. So we continue, and like I said, it's a war of attrition. Um, it's like I would say we're all divided between wanting Trump to come to a quick solution, even though it probably won't be in our best interests, or this continuing even longer to an unknown period of time, dragging America deeper into the war that America didn't want. And as a result, um, the deaths will all be blamed on us, I'm afraid. And there will be deaths. Quite a large number of American soldiers have been wounded by the rocket attacks on Saudi air bases and other things. Um, but on the other hand, I think it was Brett Stevens who wrote, and I think I linked it a couple of days ago. America never had an ally that is as effective as Israel is as an effective ally, but we're a very ineffective political ally. I can't help but mentioning the stupidity of today, the stupidity of blocking the highest Catholic representative in Israel from going to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today on Palm Sunday. I don't even know what went in the minds of some stupid policeman who decided to bar him from going there. But generally, the police have been doing, I'll say, stupid things, but eh, but it's more than just stupid. Some of them are clearly what the um, minister wants, or what they understand the minister wants. Some of it are purely policemen who are parochial, don't understand the world, and are, I won't say racist, not in the racism against Arabs, but the sense of anybody else who's not us must be in some which way an enemy. Anyone who doesn't support the government clearly must be an enemy. As we saw last night, there was a demonstration against the war, and they broke up that demonstration with a great deal of violence, violence that was certainly not warranted by a small demonstration. They used the excuse that people were violating uh, the laws of the um, home front. Too many people in one place. But they were doing this right on top of the biggest shelter in Tel Aviv. So everyone could have easily gone down to the shelter, which is the huge parking lot that's under the location that this demonstration was taking place in. In any case, this is where we stand. Um, I am, I go from being slightly optimistic to extremely pessimistic. I go from having some sort of hope that I'm still holding reservations to come to America on April 19th. Every day goes by, I think the chances
He
of that
says the
happening.
Israelis can't get out of Israel now.
Well, okay, stop. I don't know whoever's
One
breaking in
flight
right now.
an
Whoever's
hour.
breaking in, please don't break in. You have questions in a moment. The answer, of course, is you could get out of Israel if you want. I wouldn't leave my family and the war's going on regardless. So it's not really an option. 50 Israelis, 50 normal Israelis, and another X number, usually ultra Orthodox with connections, can get on every flight. And there's one flight an hour, 24 hours a day. People getting out via other places. But like I said, it's not an option. I wouldn't leave until the war is over in any case, or whatever. Well, war. I don't know when you say the war is over. I'm not even sure what that begins or when it ends. All I know is the book that I had finished that was ending on the return of the last hostage body obviously is not quite finished, and there'll have to be an afterward when this is over. And like I said, I have no idea how this is going to end. Okay. I think at this point I'll open up for questions. Please ask questions. I prefer answering questions than just keep on talking. So just raise your hand and hopefully I'll see it, or if not, Amy will see it and yell at me. There's one in the chat. Dochi, go ahead, Yochi. Yochi, go ahead.
I'm in Beersheva, and I have a couple questions about the Red Alert app,
Sure.
which now I'm forgetting one of the questions. But the other question is, how do we know how many rockets or missiles are actually being fired? They're alerting 122 cities.
Okay, so the Red Alert app, not the app, but the Pikuda Orif, you don't need the Red Alert. The Pikuda Orif, the Home Front Command first sends a notification, usually about 3 minutes to 4 minutes before the actual uh, rocket warning. They notify a pre-warning. Everyone gets it on their phones if they're in the area. You don't even need the app. You don't have to have your phone can be closed. It goes right through, and it's the same thing that they have in America with the Amber Alert, using the same technology that's an Amber Alert on your phones. The Israeli Home Front Command then sends you that notification. You then have 3 to 4 minutes to get close to a secure place. Then 1.5 minutes prior um, to the arrival of the actual missile, you'll get a second alert. That means enter into the secure place. Approximately a minute and a half beforehand, you'll get that
Does this
alert.
annoy you?
No, I don't understand it, but it's not annoying me. Okay.
Um,
Put them
there
over
are
there.
many cases where
See if I
certainly
can.
we've had that in Tel Aviv a fair
Option.
amount, where um, we'll gotten a pre-warning and then don't actually get the actual warning. We tend to be on the conservative side, like I said before. We go down, we're on the first floor up. We go down to the lobby of our building, which is by the entrance to the underground bomb shelter that our building has. And we stay in the lobby until the actual alert takes place. Worst case, we end up spending an extra couple of minutes in the lobby of the building. That's our thing. Some people stay in their apartments until there's an actual alert. But and I mean, there are ways if you email me after the meeting, I can send you a link to a Telegram channel that tells how many missiles are on the way, and they're usually about a minute or two before the actual alert arrives
Great.
from Pikuda Orif.
No way.
Okay.
So there's no way to know, is what you except with that telegram.
Well, no. And what are you trying to find out? What are you trying to know?
Yeah.
Every time they send us an alert, how many rockets are they talking about?
Well, it's usually one or two. It's been one or two almost the whole time, and it's not really relevant whether it's one or two. It's the same. Your action should be the same. Obviously, thankfully, it's only been one or two. If it been, that's part of the reason most of them have been intercepted. But it's one or two. Once in a blue moon, it's been three, but usually three different parts of the country. So, but it shouldn't make any difference. If you get an alert, go into the shelter. Don't think twice.
Yeah, yeah.
Only people who died have been
The
people
other
that
thing
people.
is, up until the last few days in Beersheba, we haven't been getting very many rockets. And now I think
It's sort of stop again. If you get everybody go, if you get an
so.
alert, just go. Don't think twice. Don't try to understand it. If you get an alert, go into the shelter. The only people who've died, with exception of two people.
I'm definitely going in the
Open
show.
it.
But
Okay.
the thing is, then I'm sitting there and I have these questions.
Okay, but that's the way it goes. We all have questions once we're there. Nothing we can do. Nothing we
And I
can
don't
do.
get annoyed
I'll
with
send you the link
I
to
know.
to this Telegram channel that may tell you. Alan Crimp, please.
anybody questioning the,
Good,
thank you.
We missed it most of the
good
talk.
morning.
Who's them?
Whoa, everyone stop talking. Only Alan Crimp, please.
Okay, so in terms of the topic focus that I have, it's the Strait of Hormuz. And it does appear that Iran has so much power, so much leverage with the ability to close it. Is it not the case that the US and the Europeans and some of the Asian countries have to do something to create convoys to be able to have passage through there? Otherwise, as a result of this conflict, that has been initiated, the current campaign by the US and Israel, it may well be strategically that Iran emerges with way more power, way more financial strength than it went in, because they're now starting a tolling system and all the rest of it. I mean, they have such a chokehold on 20% of the oil flow and other materials out of the Middle East. It is something of a crisis in terms of strategic balance. So
Okay, so
what is now not the opportunity for the U.S. and others to act?
okay, so let's take that apart. So first of all, for reasons that I can't begin to understand, this seems to have been uh, a surprise, which I don't understand, because going all the way back to the 80s when I was in graduate school after the hostage crisis, the scenario that the Iranians would close the straits was very much high on the agenda. And I think during the Clinton administration, they actually tried to close the straits, and the Clinton administration basically they sunk most of the Iranian navy in a few hours, and the Iranians decided this might not be a good idea. Today, they have the ability by using drones to be more effective, and it's much more difficult to deny drones the ability to hit a tanker, which is a big target. I think it's essential uh, to do it. I think it's semi-essential to do it militarily and not by agreement, because what would come of an agreement would probably be giving up other things that we wouldn't want to the Iranians. But again, it's not going to be easy. It'll require both a ground maneuver and the ships to protect the tankers from going through, and the insurance that the U.S. government would have to give to the insurance companies or reinsurance to make sure that that the ships, if they did get attacked and damaged, that they be insured. But there is no real choice without giving into the Iranian demands, whatever they may be. But again, it amazes me that this wasn't anticipated. Uh, 101, all war games that people have played out and discussed. Like I said, I can remember discussing it in my graduate school classes in the middle of the 1980s as an option. Brian.
Hi. I've got three things I'd like to ask you about Mr. The first is also about the Straits of Hormuz. I read somewhere recently that there's actually Saudi Arabia had installed a pipeline avoiding the Straits of Hormuz after the Iraq war, and it surprised me that given that Iran has been a threat for many, many years, and this is obviously a risk, that there haven't been more pipelines for various things built from all the Gulf states that avoids the Straits of Hormuz altogether and detracts from their power. So my question, I suppose, is: are you hearing any discussion about obviously you're not going to be able to build a pipeline in the next few weeks, but in the long term, of doing that in order to completely eradicate Iran's whole stranglehold over the world economy.
Okay, so let's talk two parts of it. There is a pipeline. It's being used to the fullest amount. I think 8 million barrels of oil a day are going through that. The problem is it is at the Red Sea. And at the Red Sea, at the moment, is open, but the Houthis can then close the entrance to the Red Sea, and then we get back to the same problem. The Houthis are um, less of a challenge than Iran, but as we saw previously, the United States wasn't all that successful fighting the Houthis. Israel will be more successful this time only because, and I suspect there'll be a major attack on the Houthis in the next couple of days, because the U.S. is now providing tanker support to Israel. Israeli planes could easily make multiple missions against the Houthis, which is something they couldn't do previously. Now, there is an interesting alternative that exists, and it already exists. There's a pipeline from Eilat to Ashdod. I mean, the odd thing about it is it's jointly owned by a company that's owned by the government of Israel and the government of Iran. It goes back to the Shah's time, and literally this pipeline is owned by the Iranian government, partly 50%. And there's been a whole bunch of financial issues with it, etc., but it exists. And so theoretically, um, in a short-term basis, you could offload oil wherever at the on the Red Sea side of Saudi Arabia, bring the tanker into a lot, and pump the oil from a lot up that tanker to Ashdod, and then from Ashdod to Europe. It would work. I'm not sure what the total capacity is. It's a significant capacity. The pipeline itself has significant capacity. It's just a question of, it's not directly connected. It probably wouldn't take all that long to directly connect it. And of course, that gets into the issue of peace with Saudi Arabia, opens up a whole bunch of different possibilities. But clearly, that would be a strategically smart thing to do. Uh, so, how much that could relieve a situation now, I don't know. Um, but at the moment, with the Houthis not closing the entrance, it's being used to the maximum of its ability, the pipeline that exists. Okay, Michael.
But can I ask my other
Sure.
questions?
What was the other question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, the second one is that there appears to be more concern, a formal concern about the terror the on the west about the West Bank about settlers attacking Palestinians. We're hearing more stuff about, and there's talk of sending a battalion or whatever from the army to deal with it. What is that happening? Is it being taken seriously for a change, or at last, or is it just more hot air?
It's being taken seriously in the Israeli media. It's being taken seriously by some subgroup. But listen, we have a real problem here. As long as this government's in power, nothing's going to happen. Because the people in charge of the West Bank are the people who would do this anyway. In their youth, they did do this. I'm sure they like what's going on, to be quite honest. I mean, Ben Gvir certainly would have been doing things like this if he was still, if he was younger. Smotrich was also involved in all sorts of not such great things in his youth. And I, they'll make a couple of nice statements, but you haven't even heard Prime Minister Netanyahu make a public statement against it. Not one public statement. You have the chief of staff of the army talked about it, but he didn't do anything about it. And of course, what needs to be done, they talked about now they're going to establish some money to work with the what they call Na'ar Gvarot, which are the hilltop youth, and Gvarot, and they're going to work with them in order to I don't know, educate them against doing these terrible things. Well, I'm sorry. The education begins way earlier. If they don't know that you're not supposed to do these sort of things, some education that the government may or may not do, which I don't think it'll actually end up doing in the end, is not going to stop it. These people have to be arrested and thrown in jail. You throw some of them into jail for 10 years and something might happen. But not likely with this government, I'm afraid. Michael,
Okay. Oh, sorry, my final question
go
is
ahead.
that go on. that again, what I read in the English language versions of the Israeli press, like Times of Israel, are reporting very high levels of um, support for the current action in the sort of 70s, 70% of Israelis for what's happening. And I mean, is that, what's your view? Is that holding up? Because you're very much on the, I would imagine if you were polled, you'd be not on the supportive end of the
Okay, so
spectrum.
here's the problem with these polls. Everything always depends on how you ask a question. So if you ask a question, do you think it's a good idea to take action that will put back the Iranian nuclear program for 5 years, 10 years, forever, what it might be? Everyone would say yes, including me. I mean, that's the reality. Um, and what you're having is that people say yes, but are you asking people if you ask the right questions, you won't get that 70% support. And Israelis are beginning to realize that we're not getting anywheres at this point. But again, it's like, we've seen none of the opposition leaders attack the actual military action in Iran. They've talked about not being prepared in terms of the support for the home front, which is very true. The government did nothing to prepare the home front on any level, economically or anything else. But they protest that. They talk about decision making, but none of them are willing to come out and say this whole venture was a mistake. It's very hard to do that because guess who else is very, very popular in this country? Donald Trump. And so Israelis have begun to realize, even the ones who like him, that he's nuts. Straight out, that, you could decide one thing one day, one thing another day. And most Israelis accept that, but they think he's our nuts, so to speak. We sometimes there's a phrase like that. And the reality is, he's been very friendly to Israel in so many different ways. So right now, most Israelis are sort of holding their breath, hoping it's going to work. No one wants to come to grips with the fact that it might fail at this point, because after all, from a tactical military standpoint, the Iranian part of this war has been a massive success. First day, killing the whole leadership of Iran, still knocking off people on a pretty regular basis, total control of the skies of Iran with absolutely no ability for anything to stop us. Militarily, this is a great success. So, um, Israelis still support the success, and they're afraid of the failure.
Thank you.
Okay, well, first, Richard has a question he's asked twice. So I'll go to Richard, or the next is Michael Ross. But go ahead, Richard, since my wife
Morning,
yelled.
Mark.
Go ahead.
So if Trump wakes up one morning and he can't find anything to watch on TV or do, and he decides that the war's over, what does that mean vis-a-vis the tankers at Ben Gurion Airport and other supplies that we need from the United States? Will they stop, or
When the
will
war, when the day that Trump says the war is over, the war is over. Period. Everyone accepts that here. The army is acting as if at any moment Trump could say it's all over, and that will be the end of it. Um, Look, the army claims to, the Air Force claims to have hit 90% of the high value targets in Iran. So at this point, as we hit more and more targets, the results become less and less important. Um, so this could go on forever, but the moment Trump says it's over, it's over. So that's the reality, and I think the army and everyone else accepts that's the reality.
thanks?
Michael, finally, sorry, Michael
Okay.
Ross.
I've read that the Russians might be resupplying the Iranians via the Caspian ports. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, there's a fair amount of reports to that effect. They're sending them some more drones, possibly some more advanced drones. They've been supplying them with intelligence. It's no question about it. Um, I can't. We can't question that on some levels, right? I mean, the United States has been helping the Ukrainians, so why shouldn't, on some levels, why shouldn't the Russians help the Iranians?
But
Um,
could but couldn't we legitimately bomb the ports and stop that?
we did bomb the ports in the Caspian Sea. The Israelis did that about I don't know, last week I think it was, and we destroyed uh, the Iranian ships that were there. I don't think we want to get involved in attacking Russian ships, and um, I'm not sure if they're going to be Russian ships or not.
Well, surely the lorries or trains, after they've been um, taken off the boats, would be vulnerable to being hit.
Yes, they would be, absolutely. Um, but again, it's always a question of priorities between all the different targets. Israel's Air Force is at its maximum. It's running 3 sorties a day to Iran. The pilots, the planes, everything is really at the edge of what it can do. America right now is running less sorties. The USS Ford is back in port in Croatia right now for some more repairs, and I'm not sure what else. So it's just one U.S. aircraft carrier and whatever ground-based aircraft are being used at this point. So Israel is carrying the majority of the burden right now of the attacks on Iran. Um, and well, the U.S. is supplying bombs and everything else. And if anyone who lives by the sea will see a constant flow of American jets landing at Ben Gurion Airport, bringing more supplies. So that's where it is. But we're dependent on America. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we're dependent on, like I said at the beginning, a president who's capricious and who's making decisions without real process, or any process, I should say, any process, which is very much what's happening here to a very large extent. So certainly not the way you would hope that governments act. On the other hand, takes bold actions. What can I to say? Like it or dislike it, he takes bold actions. And until now, everyone else had other ideas about what to do about the Iranians, but no one was willing to do anything. So you take the good and the bad, and you hope for the best, and you hope there's some sort of future. And sometimes it doesn't look all that bright. I put my darker cloud background as opposed to my sunny background today to reflect how I feel to some extent. I will also, besides everything else, there's always the other things we can worry about. AI taking over the world, which I actually do be concerned I'm concerned a great deal about that. And so maybe all this is irrelevant because the AIs are going to control us in another 2 or 3 years, and everything else becomes irrelevant. So you can take that approach if you want to feel good, optimistic about anything. Anyone else? Last chance here for anyone else to ask any questions. I think I see someone there. Alan Krim.
Yes, a question relates to the drones. It doesn't appear that the U.S. has created any military capability to effectively deal with drones. Is Israel been working on that? Is that something that may come forward even during the current conflict? Because right now, this drone issue seems to be, horrendously difficult. And as an example, it impacts whether we could try to successfully open the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay,
How
so
do you deal with the drones?
Okay, so the answer to that is yes. In the last war, which was just a short time ago, any of the Iranian drones that had made it to Israel were all knocked down. There was like a 6-hour flight that was more than enough time for Israelis and American and Jordanian and all these other fighter jets to knock them down one at a time over a 6 hour. Israel had a much bigger problem in the north, where the time to knock them down was in minutes and not in hours. And during the war with Hezbollah last time, we suffered a significant number of casualties from drones that got through. This time, almost none of the drones have been getting through. I don't think I know of one significant impact of drones inside of Israel coming from Lebanon. They could be keeping something from us, but it seems to be that the drones are being knocked down fairly quickly upon their entry into Israel. I don't know, to be quite honest with you, what we're using. We have 4 different ways of going after the drones, to the best of my knowledge. We have kinetic by sending missiles against them. We have the ability of helicopter gunships, which is a cheap way of doing it, but the gunships follow the drones, and of course the gunships have guns that fire rapidly and can easily knock down a drone. Those work fairly well. We have electronic means, and there are a number of Israeli companies that I know are working on, and probably between the last war and this war, perfected some of those systems to take down drones by electronically. And finally, there's the laser, which were probably been to a limited extent deployed up north. We do not know what sort of success they've had, but they were also supposed to be fairly effective against drones. So the answer is yes. The U.S. and to a lesser extent Israel, but the U.S. particularly is been so remiss in not learning the lessons of the Ukraine war. They didn't want to hear from Zelensky. Zelensky offered to the American government to learn what they had learned about taking down drones, and the U.S. poo-pooed him. And so the U.S. didn't learn from the Ukrainians. We learned to some extent, not as much as I would have liked. But the biggest thing that the U.S. hasn't learned, and this is the biggest challenge, it's a challenge for us too, uh, more munitions. Modern warfare eats up an incredibly high amount of munitions, and the United States does not produce enough. It takes, I forgot what the number of THAAD missiles it produces a year, but it's a ridiculously small amount. I'm sure we produce more arrows, but still not enough. We entered into an agreement with India right before the war began to establish production lines in India for our missiles so that we can produce more of them. But the United States needs to understand it needs to be producing much more, and it's very problematic for the U.S. They allowed the defense industrial complex to shrink, so there are very few competitors out there. And you've all heard the stories of the $1,000 toilet seats, etc. Okay. Anybody else? So I thank you all. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks, I'm afraid. If it ends, maybe we won't. But in which case, maybe I'll see some of you in the States in a few weeks. So thank you all for joining me today, and have a Chag Sameach, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks very much.
Take care.